You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Cabral Concept. Great to have you here today. Can't wait to get into our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday show, where the topic of the day is how to balance your blood sugar in order to transform your body, transform your wellness, or work on anti-aging, and maybe even all three. So a lot of people don't know this, but literally every second of the day, your body is using two different hormones that we're going to talk about today in order to make sure that your blood sugar is absolutely optimized. And it does that in order to keep you energetic, in order to make sure that your cells are getting the energy that they need to not only feel great, right, but also to think clearly and to burn body fat when you're supposed to burn body fat and store weight or energy when you're supposed to be storing it. So let's go through all of that today. I really feel like by the end of this show, you're going to have a much better handle on what it means to balance blood sugar, why some people can't burn body fat, and why others look like they are aging at a more rapid rate. So I want to start with this, in that your blood sugar really does affect so much more than just weight gain. A lot of people out there, they don't think their blood sugar is really that important because they say, okay, I'm not overweight, I don't have trouble losing weight, so why should I care about what I eat and what happens with my blood sugar? Well, let's look at what else happens with blood sugar besides just being able to burn body fat. And one of those things is your sleep. If you do not have balanced blood sugar, let's say you go to bed, you ate a big meal, and your body is now working in that meal, and I'm going to be talking about this more in the future, you might have an elevated heart rate. You might also have that elevated glucose that your body then has to work at a much harder level in order to lower those glucose levels. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, so we'll get into that. Also, increased blood sugar can affect higher levels of estrogen in the body. That's important to look at. Higher levels of sugar could also decrease testosterone. Important one as well. What about mood? Well, if you have fluctuating levels of blood sugar throughout the day, highs and lows, you're going to be feeling more irritable. You're going to be feeling a little bit more moody. You're not going to be feeling as stable. Your kind of body's going to go with the ebbs and flows of blood sugar. That's why we also want it balanced throughout the day. We want to create that state of equilibrium that we always speak about. And of course, if your goal is to either lose weight or gain weight, we need to make sure that the blood sugar stays between that 75 and 95 milligrams per deciliter. And at least that's the read in the US. You can obviously get a different meter depending on the country and what part of the world you're in. But a simple glucometer that we've spoken about before will allow you to see the range that you're in upon waking, before bed, and also 2 hours to maybe 3 hours maximum after a meal. You should always be within that 70 at the lowest to 95 milligrams per deciliter. A lot of people don't mind dropping into the 60s. I'm not necessarily against that if it works for your body, but most ectomorphs, and I would say ectomesomorphs or Vata, Pitta body types don't do well in the lower levels of blood sugar, but the Kapha body type or endomorphs do. They do much better, a little bit lower blood sugar. And the reason is that it works better with their body type and allows them to absolutely tap into a little bit more body fat. But as we get going, you'll find out that the ectomorph or the Vata body type is constantly burning glucose, and it's one of the reasons why they don't put on a lot of body fat in the first place. So the last one I want to get to, or actually, why don't I give you two more? A lot of people never talk about muscle gain and glucose. If you have low levels of blood sugar, it can make it more challenging to actually put on muscle. And the reason is very simple. Again, I'm not talking about, I don't want you at high blood sugar. I'm not just saying that. I don't want you above the 95 milligrams per deciliter on your glucometer after, let's say, about an hour and a half to 2 hours, okay? Your blood sugar should dip back down after a meal. It's also why I did that podcast for you, why move to 3 meals per day. Hopefully you've tuned into that podcast by now. So by having enough glucose, it allows your muscle to use, or your muscles, your body to use protein or amino acids to help rebuild that muscle and not actually have to convert it to a form of glucose in order to be able to replenish those glucose stores. Really important to look at. And the last one is energy. I simply want your cells to be able to use energy in terms of oxygen and in terms of using glucose and producing ATP in the cells. So this is important to look at because a lot of people are trying to say, well, I can make energy without glucose. And you can, but it's not as efficient. And so what I'm looking to do is make sure the body does not run on massive amounts of oxidation. And because when it creates a lot of oxidation inside of the body and the cells, that leads to more rapid aging. And we see that. We see a lot of people so-called biohacking. Now, I want to talk more about biohacking in the future because there's a safe way to do it, a healthy way to do it, and there's a way that you actually force your body to do certain things. And we're getting a lot of people to just absolutely remove all the carbs from their diet because they say, okay, well, I'm going to get my blood sugar down and I'm going to just make my body produce more ketones, whether I do that endogenously, which means that you just lower your blood sugar to a certain degree and over a period of anywhere from, well, it could be 24 to 72 hours if you deplete your own natural glucose stores, we'll talk about that, or glycogen stores, then your body starts producing ketones from the liver and other places as well, or you put those ketones into the body from exogenous sources, which would be outside of the body. So here's the thing, though, that our body can actually work really well on its own and that we don't always have to force it to do that. We just don't want it to get so far out of balance that it's not able to do it on its own. So let's talk about all of those today. And the reason why I'm going over this is that I just feel like if you're going to listen to all of the biohacking out there, and if you're going to read about all different articles on what you can do with your body, we need to be a little bit more educated about it. Because here's the thing. There are so many people, and I love Instagram like the next person. I really do. But here's the thing. A lot of what you read on Instagram, you see those quick little graphics and articles. It's not telling you the whole truth, and too many people are following those. They really are. Meaning you're getting your information from a short 200-word comment post or from a graphic. And there's always a sure but, meaning like, yeah, there's some truth to that, but don't go by that completely. You know, there's just, it's not deep. We're getting too much of the information we're getting is surface level. And I just think it's vitally important that we go a little bit deeper, that we understand more about our body so that we end up staying balanced in the long run, because balance is what it's all about. If you want daily amazing energy, daily fat burning, daily sleep, daily hormone balance, we need to make sure that we're doing things on a daily basis that keeps us balanced. So let's go through what you need to know. All right. So the first thing is this. We talk about glucose. When we talk about glucose, we can talk about the glucose that comes from carbohydrates, basically how our body breaks them down. It could be the glucose that comes from eating a very large meal will spike our blood sugar levels. Even just eating a lot of meat at one meal or a lot of whey protein at one meal could raise our blood sugar levels, okay? So let's just talk about glucose. Glucose would be sugar inside of the blood. We can take the sugar from outside of our body, or our body can create its own sugar in our body as well. So when you hear the term glucose, I want you to think about sugar, okay? That is sugar that is in your blood that you can use, okay? And of course, there are all different types. But at the end of the day, there's a slow release of glucose or sugar when you eat something like a sweet potato or broccoli or other types of fibrous-based vegetables. And then there's fast glucose, which is when you drink, let's say, like a Coca-Cola, right? Just pure sugar coming into your bloodstream, all right? So it's pure glucose versus one that's slower released. That's not going to give you a spike in your blood sugar as much. Like I said, the sweet potatoes. Okay. So then there's insulin. When your body has a higher level of blood sugar, let's say above the 95 milligrams per deciliter, just think of 95 or 100 or so, then your body's, it's going to produce one of the two hormones that I'm going to talk about today. So it's going to produce more of a hormone called insulin. Now, your body produces insulin from your pancreas, okay? Your pancreas is an organ inside of the body, right? Inside of the stomach-based area. We're not going to get too technical today, right? That allows you to take that glucose and bring it into some place in your body, a storage site. It could be your cells, it could be your liver, it could be your muscles, it could be your body fat, or it could be the cells themselves used for energy. The best scenario is this. what needs sugar, right? So your body will use that up first. And then whatever your body is not using in terms of glucose, like, okay, your brain's using some glucose, your cells are using some glucose, what needs more? Well, okay, you used up some of your stores of glucose in your muscles or your liver because you just did exercise. Great. So now insulin will tell you, okay, where to store some of that glucose, which is great. And when it takes that glucose and when it stores it in your liver and muscles, it can be used other places as well, but typically your liver and your muscles, the largest storehouses of it, it becomes glycogen. All right, so glycogen is a word that not a lot of people hear about as much, but glycogen, think of it this. It just means stored sugar or stored glucose. It's not a bad thing. It means that it's storing it to use it for future energy, and that's not a bad thing. That gives us energy when we need it, when our blood sugar starts to get a little bit low, and that's what I'll talk about in just a second, the last part of this. Okay, what happens is this. I like to look at it as like a honeycomb. So our liver and our muscles, think of them like honeycombs. So if you were to scoop out and use some of that honey, there's space inside of the honeycomb that needs to be refilled. It's not body fat, okay? That's not a bad thing. And it's not even being used for energy. It's just saying, okay, we have some openings here to store some glucose for a rainy day. Or it might be like, you have your cupboard, you have your pantry, and there's some spots there that you have open in order to refill your stock. It's like whatever you were missing, okay, you went to the grocery store and you restocked it. Okay, now we're full. Good. We're all set. We don't need it anymore. Once you don't need any more in your liver and your muscles, that's when it will actually go towards body fat if you're not using it in the blood sugar at that moment. Because remember, let's say your blood sugar drops down too low and it's at like 55 milligrams per deciliter, then your body will take some of that stored glucose and it will bring it, or glucose that you just took in through your mouth, to bring your blood sugar back up to that 70 or 75 milligrams per deciliter to 95. So that's a good thing. So we stay balanced, right? Now we have the energy, we have the mood, we have good sleep, we have good hormones, good ambition, good drive. You're not irritable, all of those things, right? I know that when my blood sugar gets a little too low, I start to get a little bit irritable. My patience is a little bit less. And so that's why, again, I just want to make sure that I'm eating those slow digesting carbs, I'm eating enough protein at each meal, a good amount of fat, and that I'm not eating too often and also not waiting too long either. It's just this delicate balance, and we're going to sum it all up at the end. So there's one more part to this process, and it's when our blood sugar gets too low. And when it starts to get too low, we produce a second hormone. And that hormone tells your cells in your liver and your muscles to convert the stored sugar that we call glycogen into glucose, which is now the sugar form, and we release it into our blood so that other cells can use it for energy. It can be used for the brain, and it can be used for the nervous system, and it can be used for any of the cells in the body to produce energy. And that's a great thing. We don't want to think of that as a bad thing because we took it from a storage area, we brought it out, and now we used it for energy and hormones and to balance our sleep. Remember, when we're asleep and if our blood sugar drops, okay, we use this hormone now called glucagon. And glucagon tells the liver, typically the liver first, muscles if needed, okay, we need a little bit of sugar. We just need to maintain homeostasis so that we don't wake up out of our sleep, right? Because a lot of people, they might dip into low blood sugar. Why? Well, maybe they drank some alcohol before bed. Maybe they did a hard workout, whatever it might be at night, and that drops the blood sugar too low. And then they come out of their sleep because they got a spike in cortisol. We talked about that before, and again, I'm going to sum a lot of this up towards the end of the show. But what glucagon does, if your body's working in sync, it produces glucagon. That's a hormone again. And it tells the liver, hey, we need a little bit of sugar. Not a lot. We need a little bit of sugar to bring the blood sugar back up to normal. Not to store body fat. Again, sugar is not the enemy, but to produce balanced energy. And now everything's good again. Okay, so let me sum this up how it works. You take in some source of blood sugar spiking nutrient. It is too much protein at one meal, or too many carbs at one meal, or really fast digesting carbs. Any one of those, or just a huge meal, and that would increase the glycemic load of the meal, and that would spike blood sugar, okay? Anything that spikes blood sugar. Believe it or not, other things can spike blood sugar as well. I've talked about them before. A really hard workout, will spike blood sugar. Too much caffeine will spike blood sugar, and that's because of a high stress response. But again, check out a previous show on that. So here's the thing. We bring our blood sugar up in our blood somewhere above the 95 milligrams per deciliter, and then our pancreas produces a hormone called insulin, okay? So blood sugar is up from glucose. Now insulin comes out and it says, okay, we need to get the sugar out of the blood because sugar in the blood at a high level can be damaging to all cells in the body. It can be damaging to the eyes. It can be damaging to our arteries. So we take that sugar out of the blood, right? So we don't have too much inflammation. And what do we do? What do we do to get that insulin lower now? Because it's in a direct response. It's in an inverse response to high blood sugar. Once we pull that sugar out, we then turn on another hormone. Well, insulin takes all that sugar and it stores it somewhere, right? So it stores it in the form of glycogen. So it stores it in our liver, it stores it in our muscles, and then if blood sugar gets too low, we produce another hormone called glucagon, and glucagon will now extract some of that stored sugar that we call glycogen, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. That's the balance between those. We take in glucose, we have higher blood sugar, the pancreas says, okay, let's lower blood sugar, it produces insulin. Insulin then forces it somewhere to be stored. It gets stored as glycogen. And then if your blood sugar ever gets too low, it produces a hormone called glucagon, and that takes it out of the cells. All right, so that's how it all works. Really, really important. Now, what does that all mean? Well, what it means is this, is that when your body for too long has had blood sugar spiked, this is why a lot of people, they get results, and that we do the same thing. So we do a 21-day functional medicine detox to try to really rebalance glucose levels, to rebalance inflammation, to rebalance hormones. So we do a 21-day functional medicine detox where it is lower carb. There's no doubt about that. Now, again, those people aren't looking to lose weight. We increase the sweet potatoes, we increase berries, we can do that. That's fine because it's about health as well, right? It's all about balancing health. But for a lot of people, it is good to go lower carb, not low vegetable, but lower carb for a period of time. We do it for 3 weeks. And then what we do is we gradually increase the carbs in order to allow the body to know what to do with those. Because what happens is you don't want to completely decrease carbs forever because it affects certain processes of the body. And it does affect hormones, and it does affect cortisol, and it affects sleep, and it affects mood. So here's what we want to do, is we want to get the body able to use insulin again to get sugar into your cells. Why does that matter? Well, over time, the body can become insulin desensitized. And that means that your cells no longer are responding to the sound, the effect of insulin in the bloodstream. That means that we have a lot of sugar in the bloodstream, but the cells are not allowing it in. One of the biggest factors is this. It's not just about eating too much sugar for too long. This is extremely important. It is not about eating too much sugar for too long because we would simply store it as body fat, okay? That's what our body would do. But here's the bigger issue. Our body has not been exposed to too much sugar. Yes, absolutely. There's fruit juices, there's processed carbohydrates out there, too many flour-based products, too many muffins and pastries and all of those things, and cereal. But here's the issue. The issue is that we've been exposed to too high a level of trans fats and oxidized fats for too long. Too many polyunsaturated oxidized fats. Too many vegetable oils, such as canola oil or soybean oil. These things really block up and gum up the cells. And our cells are what we call, they're bilipid membranes. But just think of them this, is that our cells, like inside of that cell is where you produce energy, right? Well, the outside of the cell is basically, think of it as a wall. And it's a wall with a drawbridge, and then it has a moat surrounding it. It only allows certain things in. It's a protective fortress, and that's a good thing because you don't want all sorts of toxins in your cells and everything damaging the inside of the cells where your DNA is allowed to replicate, and you have the nucleus of the cell, and you have your mitochondria, right? You have all the things inside the cells that make your body tick. Well, what happens is, over time, it can get gummed up, and I call it gummed up, and that's literally what happens, is that your body, it takes on other fats in that cell membrane, and it blocks your body's receptors from allowing insulin to unlock the gate, that drawbridge, to allow sugar into your cell for fuel. So your bodies can actually burn up with lactic acid. So they're working improperly, and they need glucose, but they can't get it in. So glucose is not always the enemy. Sure, getting too much glucose for sure is. There's no doubt about it. But if you're taking in less than 100 grams of carbs per day, and you still can't lose weight, or you don't, you're not getting the fat burning effects that you want, it's most likely not a carb issue. It's a cell membrane issue. It's a metabolism-based issue. And I have chatted about this before, but I really believe that you don't want to just demonize carbohydrates. You really don't. We need to look at cell membrane dynamics. We need to look at the overall health of the body and not go just say, okay, well, blood sugar is the enemy. I need to do anything that I can at all costs to lower blood sugar, so I'm just not going to eat any carbs. It's not the problem. So remember, I'm a why guy. I really am. So it's like, why can't you eat carbohydrates? Like, that's the whole thing. People say like, oh, I just can't eat carbs because they turn right away to body fat. Well, why is that? Why? Now, I understand the kapha body type or the endomorph is more sensitive to carbohydrates, meaning they're more likely to spike blood sugar and store it as body fat. But that doesn't mean that you can't eat any. And certainly it means that once your body gets burning, it can eat 100 grams a day. There's no doubt about that. Okay, you need to figure out timing of that. And you do need to move your body. That's a big part of this. A lot of people, they simply are not moving their body. They're not exhaling all of that carbon dioxide, right? They're also not sweating. That's where body fat loss goes to. Like, that's where expended energy goes to, huffing off carbon, expending water. So we need to get our bodies moving, but we also need to balance our bodies. We need to balance blood sugar. And so that doesn't mean overeating at one meal and then undereating at others. It means getting the body back into natural homeostasis. One of the best ways I know to do that is by actually helping out the liver. It's a big part of this, right? Is by balancing the hormones in the liver, by balancing overall blood sugar of how the liver works with the pancreas. It is by making sure that you're not getting those omega-6 fatty acids, the soybean oil, the canola oil. Those are two of the biggest offenders right there, right? But really, any hydrogenated fat, and I'm not a fan of most cooked fats. I like fats being used in their raw states. It's one of the best ways to get fat. Can you cook with a little bit of fat? Sure. But again, it's degrees, right? How good is it? And then we're talking about, okay, is it ghee and grass-fed butter and coconut oil? Okay. But it's like, then you're probably adding more fat to your diet after that. And there's people out there, well, yeah, the more fat, the better. And that's simply not true. It's not true for longevity. It's not true for the longest lived population. There's not a long-lived population out there, meaning like they have a lot of centurions or centennians, however you refer to them as, that's eating a super high-fat diet. There's not. Now, there's a lot of people out there with lower levels of dis-ease, eating a relatively whole food, higher fat diet, but they're not living much past their high 60s. So, it's kind of like, well, if you want to live a pretty healthy overall life, but die in your high 60s, there are people out there that show you, how to do that. And I don't say that from a derogatory standpoint, but that's what they're using as their barometer. But you can get that through whole food in general, right? I mean, like, you can eat whole food in general and be really healthy through your 60s by eating whole food. And it seems to be with pretty much any diet with whole food. But the centennians or centurions are the ones that are living a predominantly long life, following the predominantly blue zones-based principles, eating a whole food diet, but also getting it from a lower protein, relatively lower fat, higher plant-based diet. Now, again, I'm as unbiased as they come. If there was another diet they were all following, I'd be like, yeah, let's do that. But they're eating a lower calorie, predominantly plant-based diet, which, by the way, does not spike blood sugar, a relatively lower protein, which allows cancer cells not to thrive because it's lower levels of IGF-1 or insulin growth factor, and they are sustaining themselves by moving their body quite a bit during the day, 10,000 steps or more per day. They're not overdoing their movement. They're not underdoing it. They're having communal-based dinners. They're enjoying life. They're not overdoing alcohol, right? So it's not just about moderation, but it's also what we're putting into our body. Really, really important. So they're not going like super high in anything, and they're also not going super low in anything. That's the whole key. It is about equilibrium. It's not even about, everything in moderation. It's really not. It looks like that, but it's what does your body need? Meaning if your body's wasting away, losing too much muscle, right? You can see, I can tell on people, they're this mesomorph body type, and they're too thin, they're too lean, because their elbow joint is just protruding. I can see it way more than their bicep. Their elbow joint is wider than their bicep and tricep. And I can tell that they're in more of a catabolic state. And they're like, yeah, but I look super lean. Just say, I understand. But if you keep this going for the next, let's say, couple years, you're going to age at such a rapid rate that you're not going to be able to just change that, no matter how much collagen you use, right? Because your body is going to begin to break down, and it will compensate. Remember, I just went through how your body compensates today. Insulin, glucagon, stored glycogen, which is your stored glucose, right? Bringing it back up when you need it. And you can try to hack the body, but eventually it will always find a way to bring itself back to normalcy. And it will do that through lowering your own hormone. You won't be as energized, and you won't want to put out all of that energy and expend all of that energy with exercise. So today was really about teaching you about your blood sugar, what you can do about it, and how you can stay balanced. So I recommend, again, doing a functional medicine detox, but do what you need to do to balance your blood sugar levels in the first place, then introduce more complex carbohydrates, ideally a little bit at all 3 meals, okay, to find out what works for your blood sugar, not overdoing it, not underdoing it, okay. And if you're still losing the weight or feeling good, feeling balanced in terms of blood sugar, you can try adding a little bit more. Maybe it's just at breakfast, or maybe it's just at lunch. We usually do a little bit less at dinner in terms of carbs. We do a little bit more at lunch, the biggest meal or the strongest meal of the day, when hopefully you're burning more carbs, either replenishing from a workout earlier in the day or getting ready to burn it maybe that afternoon with a workout. So we can look at it that way too. And again, this is episode, let me give you the episode for today. Today is episode 1230. So if you go to StephenCabral.com/1230, you can see all of the different episodes before that. Actually, if you go to StephenCabral.com/podcast, you have all the previous episodes. Yesterday, I went over why your blood sugar is causing inflammation and aging you, and today is teaching you another level of that. What does it mean? What does blood sugar actually mean? How does it stay balanced? So it's my goal with the Cabral concept that you learn more about you. Will you learn it all in one show? No, but we have to get rid of that mentality that one Instagram post, one article, one book, one podcast, whatever it is, teaches us everything we need to do. It's an accumulation of knowledge. And even if you've read a book on a topic, well, good. Read 10 more, right? Because it's the repetition, it's the going back, it's hearing it in different ways. It allows you to assimilate it, and eventually it becomes a part of you. You know it, and at that point, that's when I always say this. I want you to take that information and pass it on to someone else that you believe it will help. So hopefully today's podcast was helpful. Thanks so much for tuning in. If we can ever help, just head on over to Cabral Support Group. It is a free Facebook group. We have health coaches over there on my team, certified by me to provide you with the information that you need to take that next step. Head on over to CabralSupportGroup.com. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have an amazing rest of the day, and I'll be back tomorrow with our Training Thursday show. Take care. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at StephenCabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.